Good evening from my side. My name is Patrick Mikalef. I work as a professor at the Norwegian University of Science and Technology, NTNU, in the Department of Computer Science. And today I'll present to you some reflections on a project that we did in NTNU. It's a pilot project, a sandbox project, on using Copilot. So these are not really a project that I was personally involved in, so these are kind of like meta reflections of the project itself. So a few things about what we wanted to do at NTNU, or what was the objective of this whole project. There was an initiative to try to deploy Copilot in terms of the staff, the students, to see how exactly it can help us to improve the things that we do, our meetings, our tasks, our teaching. So about a year ago, we started the Sandbox project. And this Sandbox project was supposed to be a small-scale implementation of Copilot to try to understand a little bit what are the challenges, what are the difficulties, what are the ethical dilemmas that arise when we implement a technology which is as powerful and has so many utilities such as Copilot. So the first thing was to develop a toolbox for how organizations in the public sector can try to approach Copilot, a few best practices, a few lessons learned. And the second thing was to develop some information material of how organizations can actually use this and do kind of like an ethical assessment. And I will show the links later. There's a report which has been released as part of the team that was responsible for this, and you can download the report, you can have a look at it, and there's also a shorter version of this report. So a few things about the whole setup. So the whole idea was to develop this independent assessment in the middle here. So we have the public entity, in this case it was NTNU. We have the provider, in this case it was a product by Microsoft, Copilot, and Crayon, which is the service delivery provider. And obviously this needed to be done in coordination and in alignment with the different agencies like Datatilsynet, SIGT, and so on. And as input, we also utilize a lot of the experiences that we have, personal experiences, some recommendations, input from a sharing arena. So all this try to form our independent assessment of how exactly we can use Copilot and what can we learn about deploying it in a small scale. So very quickly about Copilot, because I know that this will be discussed a little bit later. Microsoft Copilot is this thing in the center here, and everything around here is basically products that Microsoft sells. And they are divided into different categories of products or features. For example, we have things about modern work here, so things that you probably use every day, like Microsoft Word, Excel, and so on, PowerPoint. We have business applications, we have applications for developers, we have things for browsing the internet, products for analyzing data or developing AI. And specifically, we focused on two areas. One of them was the part about Bing Enterprise Chat, so a tool that can allow you to interact with this agent. And the second most important one was trying to see the features that Copilot enables in terms of modern work. So how can we integrate it with the tools that we use mostly in our everyday work? So PowerPoint, Excel, Word, Outlook, Notes, and so on. So the things that we academics use quite significantly. So what we did at NTNU and what the Department of IT did as a sandbox project is that they opened a technical test for 10 to 15 users, and they evaluated this over a certain period of time to see exactly what happens, what kind of things you can learn from the project. And a few things about how this whole interaction works with Copilot. So on the one hand side, you have Microsoft 365 apps, the ones on the top left, like Word, PowerPoint, Teams, which you can then generate prompts through these apps. So this is the functionality that Copilot enables. And the function that Copilot does is that it prompts Microsoft Graph, and Graph is a very complex set of technologies which try to link different documents that you have, like calendar, notifications, documents, messages, emails, and so on. I will not go into too much detail about this because, first of all, I don't know how it works, and second of all, I know it's going to be discussed a little bit later. And then the whole idea is that with a large language model, an LLM, you can actually create prompts, and you can generate some kind of useful information by looking into the graph and prompting it into the app. So as I mentioned, Microsoft's Graph is kind of a complex way of linking different documents and trying to find insights and trying to understand a little bit what are the connections between different elements that are inside. So if, for example, you have a meeting, it could locate relevant documents, it could identify insights, it could generate other previous or future events. So it tries to make these connections and present it in a way that makes sense. So it generates also new information. So what were some things that were found and were reported in this document? Some of them are good, some of them are bad. So how exactly do we make sense of these? So first, reflectionist Copilot is great when you already know what you want it to do. So you really need to have a task and an idea about how exactly it should be used. The second one, which is a bit worrying, is Copilot can affect the exercise of public authority. So you have a lot of overview, a lot of control, and you can actually influence what people are doing and how exactly they're doing certain tasks. The third one is that Copilot processes huge amounts of personal data in new and uncontrolled ways. So sometimes, for example, we use our mobile phones as a work phone and as a private phone. There isn't a very clear boundary about how exactly it collects and it processes data, which can be problematic at times. Or, for example, when we have emails or we correspond with colleagues and we are talking about something personal, it cannot really differentiate what is private and what is work-related. Very quickly, Microsoft 365 is challenging to manage, so there's a lot of rich information, a lot of documents, a lot of different types of applications. Copilot is in an early stage of development, so this needs to be taken into account. That it's not a finalized product. It's something that's kind of developed on the spot and lively updated by Microsoft, so it does come with certain limitations. 6 and 7, I think, are something a little bit worrying. So Copilot affects the organization, it affects how we work, how we interact, and it can also be used to monitor and measure performance of behavior. So it can generate a lot of insights about what Hans is doing, what Per is doing, what some people are doing during their spare time. And of course, it can work really well at sometimes. Some preliminary notes about this, and these are like the ethical reflections. One worrying thing is that it has uncritical access to everything you have access to through the Graph server. So sometimes, as I mentioned, we have things on our personal phones or we exchange private emails through our work email. And one of the things that it has is that it can integrate this information and can use it in problematic ways sometimes. So it's really important to make sure that what it processes and how it processes doesn't infringe on our personal data. The other thing is that the prompts that we use in Copilot can generate very complex searches. So that means that sometimes when we're asking, for example, what is Hans doing tomorrow, I might want to know his agenda and when he's free. I might get information that wasn't really what I expected, like that he might have a medical condition, or that he might be sick, or that he, for something that's completely out of context, simply because of the way I formulated the prompt. And lastly is that the prompt design itself, like how we interact and how we ask questions on Copilot, is something that we actually need to train and understand how to do. So it's a skill that is required, and there is a certain level of competence that we need to develop on this. So these are, very quickly, 3 of the ethical reflections, 3 of the key findings of the report. I wasn't the one that wrote the report. And this is kind of like a representation of what Copilot looks like at the moment. It's like a very powerful engine that probably doesn't have very good brakes, so we need to be careful of that. For those of you that want to learn a little bit more about the whole report and what was found, I would suggest that you go to this link, ntnu.no/copilot. The authors are listed above there. I don't take credit for the report. They did everything. I was just an observer. And they have very detailed information about the things that were found and how exactly they can be used by public bodies. They also have a short version of this and also a maturity assessment that can be used from public organizations. So they've tried to turn it into like a work tool to try to see how ready you are as a public organization to adopt Copilot and what things you should take into account. Another thing that was kind of discussed a little bit is this idea of hallucinations, I know it was mentioned previously, and how we as humans interpret what is produced back to us, or what Copilot serves to us. This idea of magic 8-ball thinking is basically the understanding that whatever comes back from generative AI to us is real, is true, is factual, when in reality it is not. And it's often based on probabilities and on estimations. So there's this nice graph, just to put it here, to try to make us think a little bit more reflectively about how we critically look at content that is created from generative AI. Do we know that it's true, the content? Do we care if it's true? And in what kind of situations are we supposed to actually know about it? I know that some people are struggling to see the writing there. Hopefully after this event we can share some of the presentations. But I know that time is limited and my time is probably up. So with that, I would like to thank you very much. And yeah, look forward to the discussion later.